One of the great surprises in Ecclesiastes, the quester or the preacher, is the number of times Solomon tells us to enjoy life. David Jeremiah says, "The secret of life, the power of finding heaven on earth, is embracing heaven while accepting earth." Every mountain has an uphill and a downhill, and they're the same. It depends upon which way you're facing. But one of the lessons in Ecclesiastes is that God enjoys your enjoyment. The Irish poet Evangeline Patterson wrote these words: "I was brought up in a Christian environment where, because God had to be given preeminence, nothing else was allowed to be important. I have broken through to the position that because God exists, everything is important." Now, Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 1. "As dead flies give perfume a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honour." This is flies in the ointment of the apothecary, which causes it to stink in the AV. You know how it is with a fly. If you're so thirsty and there's a mug of tea and there's a fly floating around in the top, so you don't want it with the fly in it. Or do you remember, the older ones certainly will, when there was hanging from the light bulb that dangled from the ceiling some sticky brown paper, and flies would stick on it in a sort of kamikaze suicide dash. Flies, they're not nice. And as dead flies give perfume a bad smell, a little folly outweighs wisdom and honour. The insects turn what should be beautiful into something repulsive. And flies are very elusive. Dead flies can rob us of our testimony. It makes the testimony unsightly. Dead flies give perfume a bad smell, and it may be you've got a bright testimony, but there are some dead flies in it and people don't want to hear it anymore. It's kind of laced with a lot of unbelief these days. Or is it a dead fly of a mocking spirit? And people don't take you too seriously now because of your flippancy, of that mocking spirit. Or is it harshness? Every now and then you cut loose and speak so harshly. Maybe it's a critical spirit or moodiness. You know, there is a fragrance attached to our lives. And his name is as ointment poured forth. But dead flies give the ointment a bad smell. A little folly outweighs wisdom and honour. Lives give off a certain fragrance. Ephesians chapter 5 verse 1, "Be imitators of God, therefore, as dearly loved children, and live a life of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." And maybe I'm speaking to a believer who's going round with a face like a bag full of spanners. And that makes the perfume give off a bad smell. It doesn't look good for a believer to look like that. Chapter 10, verses 8 to 11, is a wry comment on foolish workers, those who are too self-confident or too presumptuous. We must avoid folly. Life doesn't always turn out as we intend or as we desire. In any activity, risks are involved. And that's what we get in chapter 10 from verse 8, where we read, "Whoever digs a pit may fall into it. Whoever breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. Whoever quarries stones may be injured by them. Whoever splits logs may be endangered by them. If the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. If a snake bites before it is charmed, there's no profit for the charmer. Any activity does involve risk, but be wise. Verses 12 to 13, words from a wise man's mouth are gracious, but a fool is consumed by his own lips. At the beginning, his words are folly. At the end, they are wicked madness, and the fool multiplies words. Ill-chosen words are like the evil spirits released from Pandora's box. Once loose, they can never again be contained. You can't unsay something you said any more than you can unring a bell. An undisciplined talker does a lot of harm, H-A-R-M, a hit-and-run mouth. The Message paraphrase on Ecclesiastes makes the comment that God has designed us to be empty without him. He planned it that way, that we would be restless without him. All the way through this journal, we've been reminded that God has made life boring on purpose. This is a preacher talking. The most notorious testimony ever written. How dare he say life isn't worth living, there's nothing to it. It's a document of drift. All his struggles are well documented. He's done the research. A neighbour used to say to me when I was a kid, "A little bird told me," and I never realised she was quoting from the Bible. In fact, from Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 20. It reads, "Do not revile the king even in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom, because a bird of the air may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say." Curious as it may sound, people in Central Asia love the book of Ecclesiastes. They just seem to understand it intuitively. Similarly, they love the book of Proverbs. Let's do a speedy resume. Ecclesiastes is probably the strangest book in the Bible. It is fairly easy to understand, but it says the most outrageous things. You might compare it to Proverbs, which are God's sound bites. Like the Speaker of the House presiding over a debate in his own mind, so is Solomon. So the motion, life is not worth living, is followed by a motion that it is. It's obvious that Solomon's life was filled, but not fulfilled. Solomon has tunnel vision. He assumes that death is the end of conscious existence. So a synopsis of Ecclesiastes could be, life stinks and then you die. His stark honesty is alarming. Here are some one-liners. Chapter 1 from the Message. Everything's boring, utterly boring. No one can find any meaning in it. Life's a corkscrew that can't be straightened, a minus that won't add up. Chapter 2. It's all smoke, nothing but smoke. Both the smart and the stupid die, and that's it. He hates life because it's all so irrational. That's the Living Bible. Foolishness, chasing the wind. Chapter 7 from the Message. I've seen it all in my brief and pointless life. Living Bible. Tackle every task that comes along, and if you fear God, you can expect his blessing. Chapter 9, the Message. It's one fate for everybody. Life leads to death. That's it. Solomon reckons death plays to win. Life plays unfairly. It's rather like Monopoly. In the end, it all goes back in the box. But listen, believer, we have this idea of the way things are supposed to run. Surely it's meant to be different. We're transfixed by the book of Job, where the worst happens to the best, where Job cries out, "I despise my life. I would not live forever. Let me alone. My days have no meaning." But Job, Solomon, listen, in the beginning it was not so. As David Jeremiah has written, we have our Father's eyes. We have eternity stamped upon our hearts. We are made for heaven, where life is fair, more than fair. But we must settle for earth, where life deals from the bottom of the deck. The ultimate unfairness is the cross.